Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming. Slide 2. Okay, so this is a little bit of guff stolen off the Wikipedia site for the organisation that I'm working with this archive. So basically the ACTF is a not-for-profit foundation that was established to develop and champion the making of quality children's television. So over the last 40 years, they've developed a very large photographic archive consisting of images of sets and workshops, behind the scenes, actual scenes being filmed, deleted scenes, character portraits, costumes, puppet development, which I really didn't know was a thing, but it's a thing. And to my favourite, which are images of production teams at work. So I get to see, the actors and the director all standing around the camera going, and making sort of very important faces at what they do. So it's quite a great archive to be working with. So my task is to prepare the photographic archive of the ACTF for digitisation. So what that means is I basically get it all prepared and hand it over to Michaels, and they do all the scanning. We'll get to that. So the ultimate goal of the project is to give the communications team at the ACTF full access to the historical archive of images taken by and for television shows produced by the ACTF since 1981. These images are to be used in marketing material, reports, educational programs, and of course, social media. So, all right. This photo was taken at the launch of one of our TV shows. Here we have Hazel Hawke, former Prime Minister Bob Hawke's wife, and Janet Holmes à Court, on toilets, as you do. So this sort of gold needs to be preserved, and it needs to be out in the world where people can see it and not hidden away in a manila folder somewhere. So my desk isn't always pretty. That song, Little Boxes, comes to mind a lot. So slides make up the majority of the content that I work with. And I also work with photographic prints and archive and negatives, so all the usual formats. My workflow. So there are essentially 6 phases to the process: gather, select, describe, clean, deliver, over here to Michael's, and to house, which sounds simple enough. Okay, gathering. I can't tell you the amount of times I have rushed right past this step. So it's got to the point where it felt like the photos from around the twist were just breeding in back cupboards like coat hangers. Every time I turned around, there'd be like a new folder appearing that I hadn't seen before. So after a few different shows of making this mistake, I finally figured out that I had to absolutely go through everything in the entire office and get the entire collection in one place. Because there's nothing worse than sending it all off to Michael's, all beautiful, and then finding some gold that should have been in with the original package. So once I'd gathered everything into a pile, it comes to the fun part, which is the time to watch the show, which is actually a vital step. And it took quite a bit of time for it to sort of sink in that, no, I need to actually sit down and stare at the entire show, episode by episode, so that I knew who everybody was and everything that was happening, because guessing wasn't going to get me far. You know, the metadata would not be rich. It would be just pointing out the obvious of what you could see. So I needed context, especially on Round the Twist. So pulling images out like these and not knowing what's going on, it made my job a bit more bit more interesting to sort of go into the detail and find out what was actually happening, and so I could build the metadata. So the picture in the top right there is from an episode called Little Black Balls, where the goat eats some rubies. So the whole episode, everyone's chasing around the goat and going through the goat's poo, which was actually quite hilarious. I can't actually remember what was happening in this one, but the dog had done something and they were also waiting for some sort of toileting to occur. There are a lot of poo jokes in Round the Twist. I don't know if... Has everyone seen it? No? Oh, I hadn't seen it as a kid, so this was my first introduction. And I was more than a bit surprised to discover this lady in the collection. I think in around 1993, she had visited the set out at Crawford Studios, and there were 3 photographers hired for the day. So we had this entire rather boring stroll around the studio but from 3 different angles. And so there are actually quite a lot of photos in that collection. And because it is the Queen of England, it was decided that we would keep all the photos. And I didn't put it in here because I'm not sure if it would have been okay. I might have got in trouble for it. But there is a picture of the Queen like having a good scratch in her ear while one of the characters is talking to her, and she's looking quite bored. So you just never know what you're going to find in there. Selection. So my semi-educated guess would be that the number of physical items in the collection would be somewhere between 15 and 20,000. So now you know why I was hunting high and low for content. Culling is a vital part of the process. Generally though, my angle in terms of making the selection was to present little collections, so episode by episode, telling the story of that episode. So I'd watch the show, go through all the images for it. There might be 500, 800 slides for that episode, but I would go through and choose the most beautiful. Like I would choose things because they were actually a beautiful shot, it was well composed or what have you. But also that sort of told the story of the episode. So you could actually flip through the slides and say, okay, this was obviously what was happening at the start, and sort of work through what's happening. Some episodes, like this World War II one of Round the Twist, it was just absolutely beautiful. Every single frame is just gorgeous. This was actually a behind-the-scenes shot of these two. This is the local real estate agent developer, and everybody goes back in time. And so, back in time, he was a World War II general. So it's quite tongue-in-cheek, but it's well worth watching the show. It is all on YouTube. If you have small people, they will enjoy it immensely. I was really pleased to discover that they had contact sheets in some of the collections, because it sort of made the process of selection a lot more enjoyable, because of course you can literally compare everything. There were times when I was sort of holding up, very similar slides to the light and trying to work out, oh, this person's blinking in that one, but that person's got their tongue sticking out, and all those sort of things that go through your mind when you're looking at your images. And the next step is to describe them. So this picture might not be worth 1,000 words, but it was definitely worth a persistent identifier, format and content descriptions, identification of the actor responsible for this piece of awesomeness. I have used this image as my profile pic at work, by the way, so one of the goals was also to show the rest of the employees of the ACTF what's in the collection, because a lot of them, like the photos were taken 20, 30 years ago, and In a lot of cases, they haven't been touched between the photographer and me. So I take every opportunity to kind of share the gold. Which brings us to possibly the boring part, the metadata. Here you can see the spreadsheet for the show that I'm currently working on, Crash Zone. I generally set up a template which has got the persistent identifier, so every image needs a unique number. So that you can pull out the corresponding slide or negative or what have you, but also so that when they're all put in the database, none of them merge because they're the same file name. So you can't quite see this very well, but this shows Crash Zone, season 1. So it's CZ1, 11 for episode 11, and that is the 110th slide in that collection. They're all slides, so that's the format note. The first thing that I've done is given a bit of context. So is it a production shot? Is it behind the scenes? Is it a character portrait? So that way, it helps with the searching in the database at the other end. Of course, I need to identify the actors, and then we've got the keywords associated. So generally, some of these pieces of information are repeated. The episode title, the series title, and the year that it was produced. And some of the other keywords, which I've got here. So this gives you an idea of the sort of keywords that I'm assigning to shows. Some of them are pretty obvious, like, okay, here's some kids doing homework, or this is someone dressed as a ghost, or someone who's acting a ghost. VIP guests, so we had Bud Tingle turn up in a few different shows, so that was pretty cool. So that way people can search the archive for those sort of events. Deleted scene, that was something that I decided to add in as I was going along, when I could see that some of the things that the stills photographer had shot weren't appearing in the final episode of the show. And it became apparent that, okay, they're obviously deleted scenes, but they're good photos, and they do actually show the making of the episode. So even though they might not have made it into the final cut, they still tell the story of the making of that episode, which was quite important. The keyword Indigenous also brings up another issue, which is a bit problematic and probably kind of disappointing. In a lot of where I get the details of the actors and what have you, which will be the credits on the show, show contracts. So I'm looking up in physical files to get people's names and things like that might not have been put on IMBD, because that's not always correct. And in a lot of cases where we used Indigenous people in the shows, they weren't always recorded who they were or what their name is. So it's a bit difficult to acknowledge their work in a lot of cases, which sort of obviously was pretty depressing. But I decided putting the keyword Indigenous in would help find those images in the future, so that if we ever were able to identify that person, or if I came across that person again in another show where they were identified, I could then go back and correct the record. So it's kind of, you're not just putting in descriptors, you're putting in little content notes to remind you of things you can improve in the future. Cleaning. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, I don't have a lot of time to clean the slides back to pristine condition. But in the cases where there's a lot of writing on them, where there's a lot of stickers, texture, gunk, then I absolutely would jump in and give them a really good clean, because that sort of stuff can affect the action, like there's little chemical reactions and things. So it is important to think about that kind of thing when you're processing your items and putting them away. Eucalyptus oil is the best thing. So that and cotton buds, that's pretty much that part of the process. And the next part is to deliver them to Michael's, where they do all their magic. I think we've got some of the digitisation stuff here, and so Michael's can talk to us about that at the question point if we want to get into that. So what I deliver is generally a folder. It might be, in the case of Round the Twist, there's a lot of slides per episode, so it might be folder per episode. So the bag will be quite big and quite chunky, but other shows where not a lot of photography was done on the production, they might be sort of 80 slides for the entire show. That might be 2 or 3 series long. There's a show called Genie from Down Under, which only had 2 seasons. And I think in total that had maybe like 75 slides all up. So, which vastly different to Round the Twist, which had about 1,200, I think, for 4 seasons. So the next step is housing. Now, luckily we do have a lot of these amazing archive boxes which were purchased for a previous attempt at organising the collection. So maybe 1/3 of the collection had been processed into these archive boxes, but they were still quite a mess and lots were missing. But so part of my job is going to be to clean up those boxes, design new labels and get that all nice. I have this vision of walking up to the cupboard and just opening it and everything being absolutely perfect. And of course, findable, which will be very different to how I found it. So basically, that covers my workflow. I think, there are other things that when you ask questions, I'll get into a bit more detail. It's a great collection to work with. Some of it is pretty horrible. Stills photography can be pretty boring, but occasionally you do come across just something that will absolutely take your breath away. Such as this image taken for Yonder Boy. Does anyone remember that film? Came out in 2001. Unfortunately, it was about a month before the September 11 terrorist attack, so it kind of wasn't really in the cinemas very long or anything. It was a beautiful film. I think it's going to be streamed on SBS sometime this year. As soon as I pulled the images out, I knew that something different was happening here. And it turned out that the director knew of a photographer called Penny Tweedy, who you should absolutely look up. Her work is stunning. And the director got her engaged as the stills photographer on the set, and her work was just streets above the rest. It was sort of the difference between, documenting an event and actually making it really beautiful. They were just absolutely stunning images. She started her career in the London fashion scene. Do you know the pictures of Twiggy with her short hair and her massive eyes? That's Penny Tweedy. And then she ended up sort of working in photojournalism and coming to Australia to photograph Indigenous people, which she was incredibly good at. I'll just go back to those slides that I skipped. So I got a quote from Lily, she's our social media officer, about the impact of digitising this archive for the ACTF. I'm just going to read it out, which I know is generally boring, but hopefully it's not too long. The Photo Digitisation Project assists our work in communications by providing a means to share our organisation's story in an effective and visually compelling way. The catalogue provides a data bank for us to accessibly market nearly 40 years of television, and the overall project guarantees that our organisation's history and legacy is preserved for posterity. I mean, that kind of covers the whole point. You know, if they need an image for social media, they can jump straight into the data bank and pull it up. So they haven't had, that's a luxury that they haven't had previously. Previously they would send the receptionist into the archive, which was filing cabinets and boxes, and she would have to sort of delve through and find something that was relevant. So they're all really looking forward to not having to do that anymore. Here's a few images from events and shows. George W. Bush's, no, George, what was the first Bush? That's Barbara Bush anyway. When she was the First Lady of the United States visiting our office. You can just see Anita Keating in the background. And they're some of the puppets from the Liftoff show. Top right is a TV show. It was sort of like, they were like little telly movies that were a series. And this was Nicole Kidman's second acting job. So, and this image here shows the artist colouring in one of the animation cells from a TV show called Little Elvis. And you can see just like what a gorgeous moment there with all her colours, and that was, you know, a lovely find in the collection. Okay, now it's your turn.
2 questions, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
Number one is, once you digitise something,
Yep.
Is there any purpose in keeping the originals?
That's contentious. As an archivist and my previous experience working at the National Library doing this sort of work, the answer is a big screaming hell yes. But in terms of at the ACTF, my boss is like, why would you even want to label the boxes? She's like, we just need it there in case there's a digital apocalypse and we lose the digital archive, which just... we'll be labelling the boxes even if it's on my own time. So yeah, it's kind of a choice. So if you are doing it for your private collection, it's hard to say. I mean, I've recently just downsized. I'm mostly reading ebooks now. I've sold off a lot of, or sent most of my books to op shops. So on that side of things, I'm absolutely pretty happy to let that stuff go. But I think when it comes to photography, there's something about that thing, that object. Yeah, you just got to make your own choice there, I think. Yep.
Can I just add to that? It's an artifact of a particular type of technology.
Yeah, as well, yeah.
Yeah. So once we do stop, if that does happen, using, we're using digital cameras now, we can film. So it's an example of how the technology has evolved. And it's one period in the history of photography, the technology used in that.
Yep. And along those lines, the migration of, I know it's a big concern for the National Library and galleries like the National Gallery. How do you, like, what are the ethics of migrating an artwork into new formats? So depending on the original purpose of the archive, it is definitely something people have to think about. And I know with the National Gallery, they, when they sign the contract with the artist, when they purchase a work, they actually get the artist to specify then whether or not they want the item migrated into new formats. So video and film artists from the 80s might have chosen for their item to deteriorate, which is quite like a super interesting area to think about. Yeah. Anyone else?
Just a follow-up question.
Oh, yeah.
Don't mind.
No, not at all. Go for it.
Surely there's a better archiving database than an Excel spreadsheet. Surely there must be software that's designed to manage collections with keywords and that sort of thing.
That's another context situation. So when I worked at the National Library, that was the first time I worked with Excel, and I hated it. We had a digital collection management system that could ingest an Excel spreadsheet and turn it into metadata that it would attach to the file, and you could do that with whole collections. But while there are a couple of, and that was an inbuilt program, house-built thing that didn't work that well, but I'm not sure that there are actually programs, or that many programs actually out in the world for commercial purchase that would allow you to do that. So one of the purposes of using Excel isn't just about the ingestion, which was my first experience of it, but it's just about actually getting the metadata right, the template, so you're looking for consistency. I'll actually go back to that slide. One of the things that I did was have a text file set up. So for each show that I've done, so everything that I've got to copy and paste or use multiple times, I've got it correct here. And then I can just copy and paste it there, and I can build up text strings that I can copy and paste again. So one of the most annoying things about my job is if you've got a little tiny slide that's got 12 people in it, and you've got to identify each one and get them in the right order, left to right. So I would essentially build those strings in the text file and then copy and paste them across. So what I hand over to Michael's for the digitisation part is the spreadsheet and the physical items. And then they hand copy that line by line to match up the file, because we're using Lightroom, which it is my understanding that people are screaming at Adobe to make it so that it can ingest data from places like Excel. But from all my research, they aren't interested in doing that. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons for using spreadsheets. It doesn't always seem logical, but when you think about consistency and spelling and things like that.
There are some other programs I was in school I quite.
Yes, okay.
And there's a company called Pictorial, which is based in Brisbane, that is targeting, and over the last several years have been developing a system of photograph and digital asset management.
Ah, fantastic.
And one of their selling points is controllability of access.
Yep.
Where parents say, we don't want our child in any photo or some photos or group photos or whatever.
Yep.
So they're selling that aspect of it's a much broader system.
Yep.
And you can go right through to digital asset management systems that are targeted towards the marketing world, perhaps.
Yep.
That are used by companies around the world, like Canto's one we've looked at particularly.
Yeah.
It's a much bigger product and a much more expensive product.
Yes.
But if anybody's just looking at managing photographs, except it looks like that, like the goods.
The project was started before I actually joined, like before I started working on it. So I was working with legacy decisions in that sense. So if it had been up to me, I would have said, let's do some research and find out what other programs we could use, because we could do it a lot quicker than. But, you know, the collection that we're doing is, like, maybe we'll end up with 8,000 to 10,000 items in the database by the time we're finished. So it's probably not worth changing sort of after we've already started.
40 years worth of data.
Yeah.
We've got 100. The long run's got 100.
Yep, exactly, yeah.
So it's a lot more stuff in a lot of variable conditions.
Yeah, exactly, yep. Yeah, preservation's very important at that point.
It's on the idea of preserving the originals. We've got old scrapbooks where 80 years ago the photographs were pasted into scrapbooks.
Yep.
You could never imagine disposing of that. You may have digitised it, but you never dispose of it.
No, exactly.
It is its own piece of artwork.
Yeah. I think that's probably the difference with and one of the things I have to keep reminding myself working with the ACTF is they're a commercial enterprise, space is important, they're focused on the purpose of the outcome of this. So the sort of, the preservation of the original items isn't quite as important to them as it would be in that example. Yeah.
I was just wondering, when you mentioned culling, so you're selecting and curating the collection, is that simply for the digitisation process, but you're actually keeping the other hard copies, but or you're selecting them for digitisation and only keeping the ones that you selected for digitisation and culling everything, actually destroying everything?
It's a really big rubbish bin.
Yeah.
Which is a bit depressing, because obviously there's a lot of plastic, there's a lot of wastage. One of the bonuses of digital photography, I guess, the next phase of this project, once I've finished with the physical items, will be to bring the digital archive, which is all over the server, all over the shop, just like the physical items were. And I'll be adding them in and describing them and adding them into Lightroom database as well. So, but that's a bit further down the track. I've been advocating quite a bit to get a lot of the discards to go to, or to be at least offered to the State Library, the Film and Sound Archive. In the case of Yonder Boy, I would really push for those works to go to IATSIS, which is the Indigenous Archive in Canberra, or to the National Library, who has Penny Tweedy's archive. So that would actually put it back with her work, particularly if the ACTF are sort of ambivalent about what happens with it. Rather than it going in the bin, it should absolutely be preserved in a place where it will be used and appreciated.
And is the management open?
Yeah. So some of the shows, for example, some of the shows have been made by the ACTF and some have just been produced by them. So that also impacts how many photographs they've got, but it also impacts whether or not they want to keep any. So there's been a lot of, does anyone remember the film My Brother Jack? The photos from that were divine and I was so excited. And then they were like, no, you're not cataloguing those, we're just going to chuck them in the bin. So they were all shipped off to the Film and Sound Archive, thankfully. So I'm pushing more for that. But one of the terrifying things is the word duplicate. In some cases, I had up to sort of 20 or 30 actual physical duplicates of one individual image in every different format you can think of. And they were like there were a lot of black and white images that were given away as marketing that I had to go through, but they are essentially just rubbish. They won't be given out again. So yeah, there is a lot of rubbish that goes out.
Just remember somebody else. Just a quick question.
Yeah, it's all good. No, we've got time.
The eucalyptus soil, is that just for the frame? You're not writing that on the slide?
No. I mean, I have dribbled some on there, and I have kicked myself. Luckily, I can usually find a duplicate that I can chuck out the one that I've wrecked, and I'm getting better at that. But generally, like the black boxes, I use it to clean those because they're quite chalky. They've got sticky residue from sticky labels, and so I should have brought one in with me. It's basically a photo album that goes inside the black box. So they're all made out of the black plastic mylar with mylar sleeves inside. So yeah, everything that I'm doing will go back in there, so into those boxes, yeah. So yeah, questions, we've got plenty of time.
Have you got any advice for people who don't have slides, so photographic records or in photographic albums, you don't want to dismember the album?
Yep.
There's apps available where you can photograph them.
Yep.
Is that not a path to go because of the loss of quality, or for many people here, simply photographing the images rather than dismembering the album or whatever? Is that an option for the woman in the street?
I'd say yes. I haven't done it, but in my bio I mentioned my Nana's photo tin, which is what I started with, and I actually did digitise that for my family because I remember going through it with Nana when I was little, and so it was like I think that's, where the bug started. But I just did that on a flatbed scanner. Nothing was stuck in albums. It was all pretty easy. But working at the National Library, when we get an album in, there was one in particular that spoke to me, which was by a woman called Molly Fink, and the photographs were taken between, I think, 1912 and maybe 1930 in this little album, and some had fallen out and what have you, and some were quite loose in there and all that. I think she grew up in St Kilda, but she married an Indian Maharaja, which she met on holidays in the Blue Mountains, as you do. So her album was extraordinary, like literally like playing with the cat in the backyard, aged, 14, to the holiday where she met the Maharaja, and then, so how that would be approached, they would have just scanned the whole page. So there would be like what would be called a parent record. So you would have a scan of the whole page, and then you would essentially dissect that page digitally into single images, if that makes sense. So, and you can do that, I guess, in Photoshop, Lightroom, any of those sort of things. So in terms of like how you would number those, it might be like 1.1, 1.2. So page 1, image 2 off that page, if that makes sense. I think that would be how it would be approached, sort of in a professional,
Just on that.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
I just wanted to let you know that the Stonington History Centre, which is in Malvern, there's attached to the Stonington Library, Public Library, is a local history centre, and I did a workshop there about preserving the family history. It was mostly about photographs. So they look out for what they've got on offer, because that was presented by a very thorough archivist who's got qualifications in museum studies and everything. And what I learned there was how to actually haven't tried it yet, but how to get photographs, get those plastic sleeves, the old albums.
Peeling them away.
Very carefully, so you actually do it upside down, you peel, rather than peel the plastic off the photo, you try to peel the photo off the plastic. I think it's from one memory. Yeah. They've got good,
there's techniques,
So I don't know what else they have on offer.
Check out on YouTube.
They have workshops on offer regularly, so they're free.
Good. No. Follow-up question. Do you always save in low res because you're never going to print, or do you save high res versions because you may one day put a book together?
Jade.
We scanned it at 300 dpi, so it's like a medium res. So we can print them like just 6x8, that'd be great.
Yeah. So I mean, those sort of decisions would be made in terms of, volume. You've got to sort of consider how much it's going to cost. You don't want to scan everything huge. I mean, how many picture size do you need to print of Bronson with his finger up his nose? No worries.
Sorry, I understand you are dealing with images that were photographed during production.
Yes.
I understand the value of that. What about preserving the material itself? Some of it would have already disappeared, I suppose.
Oh yes, absolutely.
The TV show itself, you're not dealing with that at all.
I'm doing the best I can with my own sort of private knowledge of preservation, but I can't do it too overtly, if that makes sense, because ACTF is a foundation. They don't have heaps of money. They're not interested in me wasting my wages and my time doing great things like preservation. So I do a little bit here and there, but generally they're more interested in the digitisation side of things.
Images were taken out of every scene or part of scenes? Or
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
like
So,
storyboard, for instance?
yeah, all that kind of stuff. There's original artworks, there's all the cells, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's quite an extraordinary collection, a lot of original artworks and what have you as well. So, yeah.
In your culling process,
Yep.
do you still keep, say, out of focus shots if they might be a unique shot of, might be the only shot of an actor or, or an important scene? Or
The answer is yes. I wouldn't. I would have been like, But the graphic designer that was working there when I started, she said we can deal with that. You know, if we need, we can work on that image to bring it up to resolution if they need it. So, but generally it hasn't been an issue. Yeah.
I'd like to ask another question.
Yeah, of course.
The lady referred to 300 dpi. Excuse my ignorance perhaps here, but there is a difference between image resolution and printing resolution. So 300 dpi can apply to a large file or a small file? Or
So Jade was...
That's what she would be referring to, pixels per inch.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for printing.
Yeah.
No, that's for digitisation. There's dots per inch, which is prints, and pixels per inch, which is the file. But their terms are normally interchangeable these days.
Yeah, that's why I'm confused.
Yeah.
PPI.
That's just for the prints as well that we scan it through.
That's just for the print.
Yeah, so I'm not sure about the negatives.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Negatives are often scanned at a higher resolution.
Yeah, it just depends because those sort of decisions were made before I came on board with the project. So ACTF are focused on the end product, not the physical photo. So they just want to be able to use it in, you know, brochures and websites and all that kind of thing. So their purpose for the digitisation is not to sort of print out big images or posters, or so they don't necessarily need it like that.
So you mentioned the digital apocalypse. How do you secure your online archive? Three different places?
Well, first question is it actually online?
Well, not online, it's just the digital
It could be
archive.
digital without it online.
Yeah, okay, good point, but how do you secure that?
So the decisions that have been made at ACTF, they are on external hard drive, which is actually how they're delivered back from Michael's to us. So they stay on there, but then we also put them on the server. They are on another place that's like airlocked, I think, from the web. So that's three places. You are actually talking to an idiot who wiped out her entire photographic archive about 2 months ago. Yeah. Including all my Nana's scans. So I was just stupid. Yeah. Basically, yeah.
You don't have originals, hard copy?
Oh, I'll get them back. Like I'll go beg my auntie who's got the tin now and do it again. But it is so easy. So easy. Just back them up, back them up, back them up, back them up, back them up again.
You get them back on disk?
Yeah. So an external hard drive is like a big USB, you know, like a little thumb drive. They're like a bigger version. So, and I think while Michael's are working on the collection, they've got copies here as well. So if, you know, we're covered while we're working on it and while things are vulnerable. Yeah.
So it's storage, or because hard drives, we know it's not a question if they're going to.
But when? Yeah.
The mean time to invade for hard disk is about 10 years. So that's really truly the best you can bank on in 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't use a hard drive for a long time, then they all of a sudden
That's
Yeah.
That's true.
There are papers written on this sort of thing. So I was talking about with the National Gallery before with migrating works from format to format. Just before I left the National Library in 2011, we were given, the common name was the black box, but I think it was a Prometheus something or another. And it's basically got every type of device you could plug into it. You can put memory cards and USBs and CDs and CD-ROMs and floppy disks and everything you can read off it. So in that situation, we were still able to read those formats and preserve them by saving them to the National Library servers. So yeah, it's a huge issue, yeah.
Do you do any enhancement, any treatment at all before you get them scanned, or?
No, basically it's just I peel off labels, take out any staples. Some of the physical photographs have got on the back, sometimes a label has been stuck on with sticky tape. Just pull it off, like strip them back to their basic self.
And there are negatives and slide as well, both?
Yeah. Because like a lot of them, like some of the slides have got 4 or 5 little labels on them, and you got to like peel them all off, and you know they move and they're sticky, and then you're getting sticky on the actual slide, and yeah, just eucalyptus, clean it all.
The frame.
Yeah. Oh, there are times when the frames are broken, and I will actually pull out a discarded slide and pull the slide apart, get rid of the discarded piece, and put the slide that I want into a stronger case and things like that, so that I know, because some of them are in cardboard. I think one of my pictures from further back had there. So some of these ones are just in cardboard. So I mean they look pretty, but
No, Ektachromes, they are gone. It's only Kodachrome that stays. So
Yeah.
you've got a mixture and
everything. Yep.
Aquavic, they're gone. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
have a lot of images which are just confused.
Yep. So, yeah.
Do you get contacted by the actors or their agents for photos?
Sometimes the actors are still floating around. So we had an office visit. Of course, it was on one of the days I don't work. By this guy, Nikolai Nikolaev. And he's now like a Hollywood actor. So he came back to sort of say hello to everybody and all that. But generally, you know, Bob Hawke died, so it was quick into the archive and find some pictures of him to put out in the newsletter to say, you know, this was his involvement with our organisation, you know, that sort of thing. That's probably more, the kind of use, but
Each image has a reference number given to it.
yes, the persistent identifier.
And then description must be a bit difficult sometimes to cover the whole description of that image.
Sometimes, like sometimes they're just so plain, there's not much to say.
So what would you do if you wanted to retrieve that image from your library?
I would put bike, transport, Viking, boy,
Horns, helmet?
things like that. Yeah. So, costume, makeup, so that, because you try and think about how will people be, what will someone want to pull this photo out for, and you know, because the actor's famous now, or he's dressed as a Viking, or we need a great costume picture of what our makeup department can do, for example. So you've got to think in terms of, you know, what someone in 25 years might need, like how can they get back to this image? What things might they need to search to find it? Like some of these are just really basic. Like this one with 2 people, I could only put scene, the episode title, the series title, and the year it was made. I think it was just like 2 really close-up pictures of people talking.
Close-up, wide angle?
Yeah, not really, because people aren't going to be looking for those details. So it's not photographers, like it's not photographic thinking that will bring people to this photo or that photo.
How would you recommend the storage of the physical,
I wish I'd bought in one of the boxes because they're great. They're
I've been told, well, you need to be airtight to keep the dust out, you know, and clearly away from light and so on.
I think where the boxes were purchased from initially was Zieta Florence on Brunswick Street. So they're basically just sort of like a large folder. The folder sits inside the black box, so you've got the sheet with the slides in it, which you probably saw a few pictures of those around, like these plastic. So those would go in the folder, and so you'd fit maybe like 20 in there because you don't want it to be too heavy. One of the things that annoyed me about how it had been labelled in the past, labels had just been stuck on anywhere, which meant people would just grab the folder out and things had fallen, things were put in upside down, which meant things were being damaged. They weren't being picked up well. So I talked to the graphic designer and we came up with so I've mocked it up here. So that's the folder that goes inside the box. So I mocked up what the labels I want to look like. So, because if someone is ever going to pick up that box, you want them to pick it up respectfully. And the first key visual thing is the label. So you want them to be like picking it up well, and the label is the cue you hold the label up correctly. You know, if it's on upside down, then you'd pick up the box and go, you know, and that would impact things sliding out of places, and because all the slides are different thicknesses as well. Like you can pick up a sheet of slides and they go everywhere. But if the bigger, thicker plastic ones don't move. So it sort of sounds a bit pernickety, but you got to think about all that stuff. But Dieta Florence, they're the only place that I know that have all that stuff. You guys don't sell.
There's archive survival as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Adelaide.
Yep.
There's Archive of Survival, and there's another place called Allbox with just one L.
Okay.
ALBOX, but I think they changed, if you look that up, I think
Yep.
they changed their name to something else.
Okay.
Yeah, from memory when I looked it up a few minutes.
Well, I think we just got them from that place because it's literally 2 blocks from the office. So
Have they got one in Adelaide? Is that Florence?
I don't know.
In Adelaide? Or?
No, Smith Street, Collingwood. Yeah, and this is Dieta Florence is on Brunswick Street. So no.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, no worries. Thanks so much for coming.
Cool. Maybe
I think that's all the questions.
if you have any more, they can
Yeah.
talk to you after this.
No worries. I'll be around.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.